because there are lots of major issues with political economy that one can discuss in the context of dealing with religion and the media. My outline is just as follows. I'm going to very briefly touch on issues on religion and leisure. Look at what an evangelical group, a neo-Pentecostal group called Gospel for Asia. So that's a Kerala-based and Dallas-based group. I'd like to focus. Except that for a variety of reasons, it is actually treated differently from the average, say, corporate institution. Because religious institutions normally are not registered as a company. So that's one thing that we'd like to clear. Religious institutions are not like any corporate company. So when you do, when you try and get data on these guys, it's tough because you reach a kind of blank kind of point because they're not accountable in that sense. Some of the mainstream churches are accountable, but some of these neo-Pentecostal groups are independent, they're family-oriented businesses, so they are not accountable to anyone but themselves. Right? So it's difficult to get proper economic data, for example, on these kinds of characters and stuff. I also got into this business of dealing with these kinds of groups because I did notice while doing work on religious fundamentalism in the media in India that there were major gaps in our understanding of religious fundamentalism, especially minority fundamentalism. And that's why I started looking at Christian groups and their involvement in raising the ante in our climate today, which is a difficult climate. Also, I think there's been a kind of massive commodification of mainstream religions in India, without a question. And nowhere is this more apparent than religious television, where faith, products, practices have been kind of integrated in really fine ways, packaged and sold to audiences as kind of religious leisure in that sense. And like I said earlier, these religious institutions, these media institutions are being treated differently, and we need to have a good look at it. Okay. Now the concept of leisure itself is problematic. We looked at it yesterday. It's linked to individuals having the freedom and time to devote to things other than work. But when we look at leisure in the context of popular culture and contemporary capitalism, it's clear that much of this leisure has been organized and sort of commodified within this context of consumer capitalism. So, in other words, structuralists would argue that leisure today is a form of control and the basis for our unfreedom, not our freedom. And people have dealt with this. Ritzer's concept of McDonaldization has been applied to dealing with religion. And of course, he's explored, how efficiency, predictability, control, these are kinds of things that characterize our consumer cultures today, and the institutions around producing those consumer cultures, and religion too is part of it. Arguably, of course, these kinds of processes of efficiency, predictability, control has also affected religion as an institution. And there have been people who have written a couple of books on it. Meera Nanda's God Market, for example. Some of you are familiar with that book. It's titled as God Market, How Globalization is Making India More Hindu. Looks at the kind of temple-state corporate nexus and the ways in which new practices have been invented, gods gentrified, and practices such as Ayurveda and yoga commodified in global India. It's another book by Jonathan James, and it's entitled McDonaldization, Masala McGospel, Home Economics, Televangelism in Contemporary India. He's also done similar kind of stuff, although less critical than Meera Nanda. And of course, one of the issues with dealing with religion today is that it's available on a variety of devices, and it's instant. Religion, there's so much of it in this country. It's interesting that the Ministry of Information every once in a while sends out an advisory to television channels involved in broadcasting, especially religious broadcasting. And it's about not peddling superstition and blind belief and misleading advertorials that are kind of disguised as religious discourses. And it's interesting that they do send this around quite frequently, but yet if you go to your television channels, you'll see a lot of this kind of stuff. Right? In other words, major religious channels thrive on marketing such correspondence. And this business of enchantment is big business in our country. One of the issues also when you look at religious broadcasting is to try and assess and analyze to what extent religious broadcasting is important to the overall mission of, say, a Baba Ramdev. Or for that matter, Paul Dinakar, who is a big Christian evangelical leader from South India. And I think there is not clear information on how important these channels are to their major missions. I think there's a lot of work needs to be done on this, on the production consumption cycle in terms of religious broadcasting. There's very little work that's been done. So I think there's a hell of a lot of work that needs to be done in the context of understanding religion, media, and communications. A couple of theoretical concerns that I want to deal with. When dealing with especially evangelical Christianity, one of the guys who's come back into the picture is Max Weber. Of course, you know that Marx had dissed religion, calling it opium of the masses. It was another German, Max Weber, who actually did quite a bit of work on Protestant Christianity. And of course, he suggested that it was the kind of Calvinist ethic of hard work and frugality that led individuals in Europe to create the conditions for capitalism through the pursuit of economic wealth and accumulation. The Reformation in Europe had legitimized one's personal relationship with God, unimpeded by intermediaries, as the only way for individuals to be assured of their own salvation. So this was based on working hard in this life, thus enabling grace to be earned through works, resulting in salvation in the next. And Weber's thesis has been resurrected by contemporary religion scholars who have used it to make sense of the growth, especially of the new churches. The so-called, the new churches, they also call the health and wealth gospel. That's what they propound, many of these new Pentecostal groups. Because they explicitly make the case for wealth being a blessing, while dismissing poverty as an ungodly aberration. That's how. The exponents of the health and wealth gospel are pretty explicit about the relation between worldly wealth and the grace that saves. The individual is always the recipient of godly blessings as long as you reciprocate that, you give back to the church. That's how it works. So the reward of prosperity in this world is a sign of what is to come in the next. Now, this is not as far-fetched as it seems. If you look at, for example, the website of Jesus Calls, which is a very large evangelical group, multi-million-dollar evangelical group based in Chennai, you can donate to 11 initiatives, including 3 that are especially related to the broadcasting industry. That includes cable and satellite television and rainbow television. How the information on the business blessing plan communicates the extent to which such ministries thrive on this business mentality. They're inherently capitalist, market-oriented, and are made for a globalized world that is fixated on the imperative of perennial growth. So have a look at this bit on the, especially on, I think if you can see it from here, it basically says, this is about the Jesus Calls business blessing plan. It was divinely revealed by the Holy Spirit to Dr. Paul Dinakar to pray for the welfare of businesses and business people, for prosperity and wealth to be created to build on God's kingdom. You can enroll a shop, trade, business or industry as a partner in this ministry. Those who are involved in business can also become partners. In the Jesus Calls prayer tower, special prayers will be offered every day for the business partners by etc. etc. Okay. Now this kind of this is the basis for many of these health and wealth gospels, and you find many of them propagating this kind of so one of the issues that we've looked at in India for a long time is this whole business of secularization. This is a big issue when we deal with religion. And of course, one of the assertions made by both Weber and Durkheim was that of the kind of inevitably negative impact of secularization on established religions. And it assumes that education, rationality, independent thinking, scientific temper will consign religion to history. And there's a kind of dogmatic belief in the inevitability of the secular replacing religion. And of course, this was played out in post-independent India here too. We know some of these debates. One of the interesting debates was between the rationalists and folks who have another view of religion in a secular country. Johannes Quack, I know that any of you have come across Johannes Quack's book, Disenchanting India. He's explored the world of organized rationalism in India and the culture wars that this is ignited. Basically, this war pits mainly post-colonial scholars such as Ashish Nandi against scholars such as Meerananda, who has openly castigated the tendency for post-colonial scholars to celebrate indigeneity at all costs, since the project of indigeneity as they see it has suffered under the onslaught of Western modernity, science and the rational. In Meerananda's way of thinking, enchanting India has now become a massive arena for Hindutva re-enchantment projects, in which commercialized television plays a major role. We can also look at the whole issue of commodification. We've been discussing it over the last day or so. There are again interesting debates related to commodification, especially in the context of religion. Now, one of the debates related to religion as a commodity is whether or not commodification encourages the misrecognition of the spiritual, debases the spiritual, or whether it indeed, in the context of everyday religiosity, enhances the spiritual. How do you deal with that whole issue of commodification? In other words, the need for us to begin to understand the use value and sign value that consumers of religion give to their products, as against its exchange value that is often inflated. So perhaps there's a case to be made when studying mediated religion to distinguish between the production, distribution, consumption circuit related to branded products, religious products, peddled by a variety of religious institutions, and the circuits that involve non-branded products and services that are vital to the routines and practices of everyday religion, and that give meaning to ordinary people. So perhaps we need to have a look at both these kinds of different ideas. One of the more enlightening studies of religious commodity flows is Vinita Sinha's Religion and Commodification. It's a very interesting book. I recommend that you read it. She explores the flows of religious material between the local and the global, of how these puja, worship things as commodities, traverse various routes and circulate within networks created across transnational boundaries. Okay. She explores how fresh flowers, prayer altars and visual representations are part of business practices and marketing strategies that connect groups of makers, sellers and buyers into a much wider network, and of how local businesses are plugged into a global network that operates between Tamil Nadu, India and Southeast Asia, inclusive of Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia and Thailand. It's a fascinating piece of work. She explores the ways in which religious commodities are activated as religious objects, and the complex ways in which such items flow through those profane, sacred, profane cycles. In other words, she contests the binary notion of the sacred and profane. And she concludes with the following observation, and I quote: despite the commodification of religious objects, perhaps indeed because of it, goods and commodities as they feed back into the realm of religious practices with charged meanings, in effect support enchanted fields of practices rather than produce mindless consumerism or disenchanted consciousness. That's her take on this. But of course we know that all religions in India have been commodified, and here's an example of one of them. Get it right? And there are lots like this. Right? In the online world, you've got massive commodifications of those. And it's amazing what's happened in the last 10 years. It's extraordinary what's happened in the last 10 years. Then of course there's something called rational choice theory. Recent contributions by sociologists of religion have highlighted the usefulness of rational choice theory as a way to understand the religious market and different religions and denominations competing for souls and resources according to the dictates of supply and demand. Okay. Now these theorists treat religion in terms of it fulfilling certain needs, and in which a variety of suppliers cater to these needs. That's how we look at it. In other words, the idea of the religious supermarket and the idea of religion that is, shadowed by the market in a sense. Within this perspective, branding and marketing are absolutely central to creating loyal audiences for their goods and services. And people have done some very interesting work on the branding of, say, televangelists. Right? Especially the Christian televangelists in the US, people like Joel Osteen, for example. Right? Or Benny Hinn. These guys have got massive command. Right? And they are brands in themselves. And of course, to a certain extent, even Baba Ramdev is a brand. Right? So there's a lot of work that's being done on that. But the problem with the rational choice theory is that it does not adequately account for the historical and cultural realities and institutional circumstances that contribute to the creation of a given environment. For example, that of religious television in India. Okay. In other words, there's a whole complex of reasons that cannot solely be attributed to the market. That has resulted in the religious television environment being what it is today. There are lots of reasons for that involvement. And this is, I think, where a political economy inspired reading can come in useful. Be it transnational Christian networks such as God TV, Daystar, Christian Broadcasting Service, or the broadcasting services offered by KP Yonan's Gospel for Asia, or Dinakaran's Jesus Calls. There are always extra market forces happening. Extra market decisions often contribute to the establishment of these kinds of services. Let me now turn to Gospel for Asia, which is the case study that I'm going to be looking at. Now, this is a multi-million-dollar